Neds. Now, Peter
Nice
Mullan,
way to finish the show, talking about Neds.
Exactly.
Top production work.
So Peter Mullan was on the show last week talking about the film, which is the first film he's directed since The Magdalene Sisters. It is the story of a kid growing up in the 1970s who is torn between, on the one hand, the fact that he's incredibly bright and he looks like he may be a grade A student. On the other hand, his family has in it a history of violence and also alcoholism. He gets himself into a school in which he could either blossom into a brilliant student or could fall back into the ways of other family members. At a very early stage, he is befriended by a middle-class kid whose friendship then breaks down. And in a very short period of time, he goes from being a grade A student to being something altogether. Here's a clip.
I am prepared to overlook both your belligerency and your vandalism if I am given first an admission and secondly, an apology.
Don't you know what you said?
I find it difficult to believe that in the space of 6 weeks, you've suddenly degenerated into idiocy.
So now I'm stupid?
I don't have to take this.
So what you got to do about it? I'll tell you what. Tell me to put my hands up, and then lash me with that bell like a real teacher.
Right, you get your hands up. Go on. Put them up properly in front of you. Separately. There! Now, you get back to your seat. Go on.
Is that it?
What?
What is that what you got to do? You got to do it properly.
Now, I don't know what's got into you, McGill. But if I have to knock some sense into you, then I bloody well will.
Neds.
Yes.
Sorry, the word that I missed out was different. I said something altogether, and then I cued the clip.
And that clip
Different.
is about the only bit that we could play.
It is, and it's the turning point clip as well. So I think what's interesting about the film... Well, hang on, you've seen it as well. Broadly speaking, you like it?
Broadly speaking, I liked it. I mean, my query would be about... Well, first of all, astonishing. The thing I walked out thinking, blimey, teachers chain smoking all the way through lessons. Did that actually happen?
It did, though.
And while they were doing that, how were they spelling dilemma in the first place?
Yeah.
But also that bit, the only bit I wasn't quite convinced is that turning bit where he does become,
goes from straight A student
to being a thug, and I wasn't quite convinced by that, but I thought it was a very interesting film, and it's always nice watching Mr. Mullan.
But what's interesting is that when you interviewed...
Even if he's playing a horrible part.
When you interviewed Peter Mullan, you did raise that with him about the swiftness with which the character turns.
Yeah, and he says... Yes, that's how it happens.
He said, literally, that you can see them go away and they'll come back almost over a weekend and they've changed completely. Here's what I think is interesting. The film is torn between two different ideas. On the one hand, there's the kind of This Is England idea, gritty street realism, understanding the kids' culture, that fine. On the other hand, it has a very highly orchestrated, very visually orchestrated sense of artifice, sense of hyper-reality, sense of almost fantasy. And in fact, in one key sequence, a sequence which I think is central to the film, is the hallucination sequence in which he finds the central kid, played really terrifically by Conor McCarran, finds himself lying on the floor in a park, and there's a statue of there's a crucifix.
Having sniffed glue.
Glue, exactly. And he hallucinates Jesus coming down from the cross and embracing him, but in a way which is more violent than perhaps one would have expected under the circumstances. And this obviously reminded me of Bad Lieutenant, the sequence in Bad Lieutenant when exactly a very, very similar thing happens. I think, in a way, the heightened reality and fantasy element of the film is the thing that allows it to get away with what would otherwise be just a sheer melodramatic contrivance. I think the film smacks of reality, and it seems to be, convincingly researched, certainly played, very authentically. The casting call was put out for young performers who not necessarily had kind of theatrical or movie experience behind them, but understood the language, understood the area, understood the tone of the film. But I think what made it interesting for me was just how artifice laden it is. I say that in a good way. It is. The lighting, for example, is very big. Obviously, there's a reference to Clockwork Orange, and in the way in which certain of the scenes are orchestrated, it's really it's not shot like a gritty street movie at all. It is shot like much more like a heavily stylized art film with sort of transcendent leanings that happens to have its feet in the middle of this thing about gang violence and knives and really unpleasant behaviour and real sort of head cracking stuff. I thought the times that it worked best were the times that it moves more into the sort of in the fantastical elements. I do think if taken absolutely at face value, there is an overarching melodramatic contrivance, particularly with the story of how his relationship with his father pans out, and the operatic, not to say Black Swan-like way in which that plays out. So there are a number of different things going on, some of which are more successful than others, but in the stylization, in its most operatic, in its most experimental moments, it really is something.